This is Skip Lockwood, and you're listening to Mets Musing. I was a pitcher, a relief pitcher, a closer with the New York Mets. I have a new book out called Inside Pitch, Mets Musing. Thank you very much.
This is Len and Jeff from Baseball and Barbecue.
And the one place to go for New York Mets news,
Past week game reviews,
upcoming series previews,
interviews,
analysis,
opinion, and what's going down on the farm. It's Mets Musings with Gary Mack. So keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.
Mets Musings
with Gary Mack.
Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
And hello, welcome to another edition of Mets Musings, episode number 337? I don't know, I kind of lost count. Anyway, wow, as I record this, the Mets have completed game one of a doubleheader against the Philadelphia Phillies, and they won that game. I don't even know it was an immensely obscene score. What the final was is 24-4. Yes, 24 runs. That's 40 runs in 2 days for the Mets. Unbelievable. So maybe they found a hitting shoes. I don't know. But what we're going to do tonight is something a little bit different. I was a guest on another podcast called the Metsian Podcast, and we're going to run that tonight. And as we discuss all of these with Michael Lecolant, the Brooklyn Charlie blogger, and so he's going to be on my show, I'm going to be on his show, and we'll see how it all works out. So that's going to start right after these massages. So take a listen and enjoy.
Looking for great Cardinals talk? Then check out Conversations with C70. My name's Daniel Shoftaw, and I talk with some of the great bloggers on the internet today about their teams, but it always goes back to the Cardinals. Find the latest episode on my website, www.cardinal70.com, or at baseballpodcast.net.
Did you know that Baseball PhD can be heard on baseballtalkradio.com?
Our shows rotate with other top baseball podcasts.
Now don't forget, that's baseballtalkradio.com.
With us, we'll help you get a PhD in life through baseball.
With baseballtalkradio.com, you'll hear the rest of the excellent universe of baseball podcasts.
516-619-6341. That is the comment voicemail hotline if you'd like to be a part of the show. And drop us a line, leave us a comment or a voicemail, question, anything at all. Call that number, 516-619-6341. Or go to MetsMusings.com and click on that widget in the middle of the screen, and that's a speak pipe, and you can leave a voicemail right through your computer through your computer's microphone. Or if you prefer to do things the old-fashioned way, send us an email at metsmusings@gmail.com. The Facebook page is facebook.com/groups/MetsMusings, and the Twitter handle is at MetsMusings1.
With all the Mets news, it is the news from around the world and around the corner. Here's Gary Mack.
Evening's episode of the Metsian Podcast, and I'm not alone. Although Sam and Rich aren't here, I have a special guest, Gary McDonald from MetsMusings.com. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Michael. How are you, my friend? Long time no talk.
It has been too long, in fact. Wonderful having you on each and every time. You're such an entertaining person to speak Mets with. So I'll give out my shameless plug. Aside from a Metsian Podcast, you can get my shtick at brooklyntrolleyblogger.blogspot.com. I just like to talk about all the local sports, but in particularly the Mets. So, Gary, that said, why don't you give us a little bio of yourself?
Okay, well, I host Mets Musings at MetsMusings.com, in case nobody knows that, and I hope you all check it out. It's a weekly podcast, and we kind of talk about the same things. I do a solo show, so I kind of take a different spin than the Metsian guys do, but always nice to be on with them and have them on as guests. And I do have guests on, authors sometimes, and I've had Peter Alonso on and Wayne Randazzo, so I try to get some guests on that are going to be interesting and pertinent to the Met fans. And Michael, it's been a rough year so far.
Hasn't it though? I mean, on the field and the weather. The weather's been stifling, and the rain's been coming down in buckets. What gives?
I don't know. I'm not a weatherman. I guess you got to ask Mike Trout about that. But it's definitely been crazy.
You brought up an interesting name, one that I don't think either one of us had any plans on mentioning. But let's talk about him real quick now that he's topical. Peter Alonso. He's tearing up the Pacific Coast League. Met fans are just clamoring to see him in Flushing. I think it might be a little too early. There's nothing going on. And if you listen to this three-headed monster that we call a GM, they're looking to backlog all kinds of people at first base. So your impressions of Peter Alonso?
I found Peter to be a very nice young man, very studious, hard worker. He wants to improve. When I talked to him, I think it was last November, so he was just back or going to Arizona Instructional League, and he was going to work on his defense primarily. And he has worked on his defense a lot. He has improved. I've watched some of the games on MILB TV, and he's come a long way. Is he a Gold Glover? No. But he's not Dick Stewart, Captain Strange Glove, and he's the type of kid that's willing to work. And as you say, he's just tearing it up there. And I don't know what else he has left to prove. And, sometimes you get concerned because you don't want to lose a kid like this either, because he could be your first baseman for the next 10 years. And I get nervous because, this is kind of what they did to Duda in a way. They kept Duda down, then they tried to put him in left field, and then as soon as they put him in first base, bam, 30 home runs, and he was hitting. And I know he's not great, Duda, but this kid looks like he's something really special, and I saw him play in Brooklyn, liked him. As I said, I've seen him on TV a few times this year. He's really really a good kid, and I really think that they should at least bring him up in September.
I also caught him here in Brooklyn, playing for the Cyclones last year. On one of my road trips, I went to Binghamton after the Hall of Fame, and I caught him there. And I liked what I saw. I mean, very small sample size, one game. Mm-hmm. But he looked comfortable. He made two plays at first base, relatively trouble-free. So, I mean, look, the Mets are on their way towards another 90-loss season. Why not have them up, right?
Exactly.
But that being said, isn't it weird how the minor leagues works out? I mean, the guy was tearing it up with a very respectable batting average throughout his minor league career. Now he gets the Pacific Coast League, and he's batting like 230 or so. I didn't look at the exact number, but that's not your prototypical Pacific Coast League number.
Well, it's a meteoric rise that he went through, and I think he just got the pitches are a little bit tougher at AAA, and I think he just got in a bit of a slump. But from what I last read the other day, I think he's hitting over the last, I don't know how many games, 10, 12 games, he's hitting like 345. And so he's found his way. He's made his adjustments, and he is really starting to hit. And even when he wasn't hitting that well, he was still hitting for some power. So, and this is what this organization talks about all the time: power, power, power. it just seems now with this three-headed monster, are we going in a totally different direction and they're not telling anybody? Because all of a sudden now, Callaway is hitting and running, and they're trying to steal bases. And I don't get me wrong, I like it, but pitches or sacrifice bunting. I mean, I have to shake my head and look at it. And could Sandy have been the cause of all these problems the last couple of years? I don't know.
I will put some things on his docket, but obviously the way the organization is run as a whole, organizationally, I have to look at the Wilpons. So, yeah, there are some things I will put on Sandy Alderson, but most things I will put on ownership. You know what? Let's transition to that, because I caught a couple of articles over the last 2 weeks or so, and here's one of them. The three-headed monster, or Jeff Wilpon, or all four, they've already announced that Mickey Callaway is coming back regardless of the next GM. Now, let me take you back a little bit. Newsday wrote a report how Fred Wilpon protected Terry Collins from both Sandy Alderson and Jeff Wilpon, whom both were seeking his termination. That's common knowledge. A month later, Newsday comes out with a second article saying that after a lengthy lunch with Fred Wilpon, Mickey Callaway became the number one contender. And then a third article, as recently as perhaps 2 weeks ago, or maybe even 3 weeks ago, the Mets announced that Mickey Callaway will indeed be returning next season, regardless of a new GM. I have one word to sum up those three specific Newsday articles, which is meddling, something we've heard before. But now that you mentioned Callaway, what do you think of that scenario? I mean, 3 articles within the last, more or less, let's call it the last calendar year. What do you think?
Well, I think that Callaway got dealt a bad hand, I think. He seems like a nice guy.
Really?
He seems intelligent. They have made progress with the pitching staff. Look at Zach Wheeler's turnaround. The bullpen's another issue. But, we've talked about bullpens before. They're so finicky. They're up, they're down. 1 year nobody can hit them. The next year they can't get anybody out. Same guy, same pitches. It happens that way. I don't know why, but it's just a weird situation. I think where they did Callaway a disservice was, I still think the weak link on this team was Gary DiSarcina. They should have had a National League bench coach there with him from the beginning. I said this over and over and over again. So if there was a question of strategy or something like that, you have somebody that's got experience in this league. Having an American League coaching staff, I don't think did him well. And I think it forced him maybe to make more decisions. And I think Sandy was was over his shoulder making a lot of decisions. And I don't think that's happening as much now. So, because Sandy is out, I don't think the three-headed monster's doing that. I don't think Jeff and Fred are overly over his shoulder telling him what to do. And, they seem to be playing better baseball now.
Yeah, I'll say. I agree with you 1,000,000%. Kind of lost my train of thought here for a second. In the fact that Callaway, I went so far as saying, yeah, his American League sensibilities are shining through. You need sunglasses sometimes. Mm-hmm. But you took it a step farther and named Gary DiSarcina. And that's the part I never approached. Who would serve that role? And you're absolutely right. He really should have a National League guy on the bench trying to, help him maneuver through the National League game. So I agree with you 1,000,000%. But before we get knee deep into this team, Gary, let's stick with the Cyclones for a second. I think that brings a smile to both our faces. They're in a we got less than a month to go. Okay, they're in second place. They're 2 games out of first place behind Hudson Valley. Hudson Valley, strong team from last year, who won the division.
Right.
And they displaced the Lowell Spinners, and now they are 1 game behind Auburn and the Mahoning Valley Scrappers. We have Jason Valera, who's just tearing things up on the mound, and at the plate we have Ross Adolph.
Mm-hmm.
So your Brooklyn Cyclones impressions about them or anybody else?
Well, they are very refreshing to watch. You mentioned Ross Adolph, and he just put on a show during the Penn League All-Star game. He became the first ever Cyclone to take home the game's MVP award. So congratulations to Ross Adolph on that. He went 2 for 3, got a triple homer and 3 RBI. He's having a pretty decent year at this level. And there was 6 Cyclones that were named to the All-Star game. So they've had a good year. They've played good in points. They struggled. They got swept, I think, by I think it was, I don't know if it was 3-game sweep or a 4-game sweep by Hudson Valley a couple of weeks ago in Hudson Valley, so that hurt. But over and all, Edgardo Alfonso has got them playing pretty good, and they've got some good young players coming through. Now, whether or not that's going to convert, as you know, they had, a couple of years they've had some good guys, and a lot of them are gone now. Colby Woodmansey got released. I think Vinny Sienna got released, and I thought they were pretty good, scrappy ball players. A.J. Mazzilli or L.J. Mazzilli never made it anywhere. So it's hard to tell at this level, but they are playing some good team baseball, and they look pretty good, and let's hope they can make the playoffs at least.
Agreed. We know the last 2 years haven't been that great in Coney Island. This year they're doing much better, as we alluded to. Now, my question to you is when when Paul DePodesta was still here, he used to go after a lot of high school guys. And the Cyclones were doing well in return.
Right.
But when he left the organization and Sandy Olderson and his minions took over the draft, they went very, very college heavy.
Yes.
And I think the last 2 years have been a negative reflection of that. I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying that the college route has not panned out over the last 2 seasons, not including this one.
Well, I'll agree, yes and no, because a couple of the guys that last year, 2 years ago, they went heavily college with Justin Dunn and Anthony Kay, and those guys are having awesome years this year. So at the Dunn is at Binghamton, I believe, and Kay, I think Kay is still at St. Lucie. He had a Tommy John, so he really missed a year. But some of the flops that they've had over the last couple of years have been high school kids, if you think about it. Now, I guess he's still too young, but Desmond Lindsay was a bomb. I mean, I didn't like him at Brooklyn. He's still struggling. I think he's at St. Lucie, but I can't swear to it. But you don't hear his name mentioned at all in any of the prospect talks anymore.
Right.
There was a couple other guys. Now some of their international guys. I'm looking forward to next year in Brooklyn, because that team, if they do it, I don't know if they'll do it. That team could be super next year. I mean, they could have Kellenick there. Maybe Richardson, this kid they drafted this year out of high school, who's in the Gulf Coast League. They could have some powerhouse next year, so we'll have to see. But, it's such a crapshoot, the draft, that you don't know. And I thought along that lines, too, when they were drafting high school kids and then they went to the college kids. But really, some of the college kids have come through. I mean, you have Conforto. You have, as I said before, Dunn and Kay, and Peterson was from college. So there's some talent down there, and they have some good international free agent signing in the minors that have really starting to shine and have made everybody's prospect list. So, it's hard to say whether it was the DePodesta effect, and clearly Sandy had a couple of years of bad drafts there, and this year was really 2 years ago wasn't bad. I mean, you got to say it's still pretty good, and this year clearly so far it's really been good. They got very high marks, so it's hard to say it with these kids.
It's been a refreshing season at Coney Island nonetheless.
Right.
I've been enjoying myself there this summer.
Exactly.
So let's circle back to the big club now. And before we get to those guys on the mound and the position players, let's just talk about the team in general. Today they're still in the midst of a doubleheader. This afternoon they destroyed the Phillies 24-4. I guess that sort of wipes out the 25-4 loss to the Nationals. But look, lo and behold, all of a sudden they're hot. And it's obviously too late. And Cespedes isn't in the lineup. Bruce isn't in the lineup. Conforto isn't the Conforto we expected him to be yet. They're heating up. It's the dog days of summer. But Gary, I think we all agree it's a little too late. So I would suggest they modify their thinking instead of bogging down some of these positions with older players. But what do you make of this hot stuff? Let me throw another stat out here before I throw it out to you. They ended the first half, and what I mean by the first half, right up until the All-Star break, they went, 39-55. Not good. Mm-hmm. They're currently 52-67. Since the All-Star game, they are 13-12. Lo and behold. What do you make of that?
Well, I could say Sandy's gone, and maybe that's a breath of fresh air went through the organizations. I think they got some young guys that people were clamoring about. Jeff McNeil's come up and hit well and played very well, I think, to my eye. Conforto's starting to hit a little bit. He hits slowly, he's really struggled all year, and but you watch some of his games, he looks bad. He strikes out 2 times up, then the next 2 times up he gets a couple of hits. So,
he doesn't exactly have the SWAT team around him. He has no protection. So, I'll be a little bit lenient,
Nimmo has been a big surprise. Though you remember, I've always praised him. I always liked him for his ability to get on base. He always seemed to be, even when they were pinch hitting him and throwing him in there last year and the last 2 years, he always seemed to be in the middle of a rally for some reason. Always was in there. And I like that, and I like the way he plays. And now he went 5 for 5 last night. I think he was 1 for 1 today. He got hit on a hand today, so I don't know if he's playing the second game. They took him out of the first game. The X-rays were negative, but Nimmo is coming through. It is interesting that they're doing this without Cespedes and without Bruce, and you almost got to wonder: are these guys more of a dead weight on the team? Or do you just throw it to the young guys and let's see what they can do? Plawecki's starting to hit. I don't know. I'm in and out of games now, to be honest, because just sometimes I just I get tied up. Like this weekend, I was watching the PGA Championship the whole time, and
Gary, I'm right there with you. I think us older guys, we get a little jaded sometimes, and we tune them out literally, but we always manage to jump back in, don't we?
Oh yeah. But like last night, I was in and out of that game because just stuff going on, and Plawecki hit a grand slam, and he had a couple of hits. He had a couple of hits in the first game today. I don't know what his stats are, but it seems like he's starting to come alive and starting to hit the way they always thought he would, and so. It's that kind of excitement. Maybe it's just an excitement. Syndergaard's back pitching. maybe there's a certain confidence in that. And you notice Wheeler going 7 innings and everything, and how it's approved everybody else, though the second game's not going well for them so far. So,
you know what? Wheeler, you brought him up this offseason. Is he a keeper? I say yes.
I say yes, too. I look, I know what everybody wants to trade somebody to build up to fill the holes. I don't see why you can't try to fill the holes internally. Let's see what we got. You know, that's the thing. If you got a hole at first base, fill it with Alonso or Smith. You have to see which one's going to make it. If not, what are we doing here? They're going to be 30 years old and you're going to bring them up. You know, I don't want to bring them up at 30 years old. Bring them up now at 23.
I'm with you on that. You know what? Heading into the trade deadline, I contemplated trading DeGrom and Syndergaard or both or whatnot, and and recouping a major package of prospects, etc. But I thought about that. The Mets are bogged down. The Mets are they're in a bind because of these contracts to Cespedes and Bruce and Todd Frazier. So, blowing up the pitching staff would have been counterproductive because we're stuck with some of these offensive guys.
That's right.
So I think you have to go forward with the pitching staff intact. If you're going to move anyone, I think they'd be inclined to move Steven Matz. Let's face it, he's running out of elbow room. Pun intended.
Matz, if the pieces were right, I would consider moving Syndergaard, maybe. Only because the way he pitches, he's the only one that hasn't had Tommy John. DeGrom, you figure he years from now he can lose his fastball, but he knows how to pitch. Can Syndergaard make that transition? I'm not sure. So he would be a guy that I would consider moving. But Matt's definitely maybe you move a Frazier. And, look, Cespedes is not going to be back next year. Let's not even count on Cespedes. All right?
Right.
And now they're talking about Bruce playing more first base. So are you going to block Alonso because you have a contract with Jay Bruce? I'm not sure that's the correct thing to do either. That's what happens to these guys. And then Alonso stays in the minors. If you're going to do something like that, then trade Alonso and see what you can get. Maybe you can get a package with him and a Mats. You know what I mean? It's such an iffy thing sometimes. I know they need a backup catcher. They need a lot of stuff, but hopefully Plawecki can win this job, and then they can maybe sign Mesoraco to because I like Mesoraco. I think he's a good backup. I think he's good with the pitching staff. I think it's small. Like they're playing him now, he can stay healthy. Maybe get a whole year in. There's so many question marks, and we're not going to know really anything until the end of the season.
Here's the problem. What you speak truth, and what you say makes total sense. And if you're a general manager, you're probably inclined to think along those lines as well. Our problem is, and I'm not going to let this podcast evolve into another, let's just destroy the Wilpons. But with them around, we know that they're making decisions not entirely based on the game and what's in the best interest of the team, but what's in, best interest of their finances and their lingering debt, which they're still in, which nobody seems to be talking about anymore. And that's my problem, because all those things you mentioned make total sense, but they're not going to. If they were smart, they would eat the money on Todd Frazier and open up the position to a young guy. It's not a lot of money. If they were smart, they would eat the money on Jay Bruce. It's not a lot of money, and open up the position for young guys. And as you say, Cespedes isn't coming back. So that's more of an insurance thing than anything else. But unfortunately, I still feel like he's too involved in the decision and the executive decision-making process with money first and foremost on his mind. And that's why I don't trust them. And that's why they need to get a GM in place with haste. And I'm not entirely sure I trust them to, go through the process, because the last time they did, remember, heading into hiring Sandy Alderson, that was going to effectively be Jeff Wilpon's first hire, because everyone previous to him was hired by his father.
Mm-hmm.
But, wink, wink, Bug Selig said, take Sandy Alderson, or else I'm going to have to do to you what I did to Mr. McCourt in L.A. That's my conspiracy thinking. So here we are again. They are going through the process of searching out a GM. Now, do you agree that Omar Minaya is really calling the shots, mentoring Jeff Wilpon, and that John Ricco is merely a transient face of the organization?
At this point, I don't know what to believe. What I don't understand is, what I don't get is, how are these three guys going to, how do you have people interview your potential boss? Because essentially, that's what's going to happen if one of them doesn't get the job, isn't it? They're going to be working for this guy.
Yeah.
So how can you, and they mention all these names. I think at this point it would have been better off if they just said, as much as everybody would hate it, but if they just said Jeff Wilpon's going to hire the next GM, or Fred Wilpon's going to hire it. Because look, it's their business too. I mean, they're not going anywhere, and they they have put money into this organization. And I laugh when people say they don't want to spend money. Well, they have spent money. It just was spent badly.
They have spent money.
And
you're right. They've spent it badly, and that's for nothing. I mean, since he purchased sole ownership of the club, let's face it, Fred's been juggling his finances like a bunch of bowling pins at the circus. Between having to come up with Nelson Doubleday's money, between seeking financing for Citi Field, between Madoff, and I'm not putting, blame on any one. It's a conglomeration of all these factors, but he has juggled his finances like a bunch of bowling pins at the circus. We have to admit that much.
Right. Oh, yeah. But who doesn't? I mean, there are a lot of guys that don't do it. And, it is, let's face it is about making money. So,
yeah. Well, you know what? You've been around a while. So have I. How many times has Fred Wilpon told us to our face, my goal is to break even?
Yeah, lots of times. But he also wants to win, which is kind of a dichotomy there, And
there you go. There you go.
And he's 80-some-odd years old. So I think he's running out of chances to win another championship. And
Fred D. Wilpon. Fred D. Wilpon. Fred Dichotomy Wilpon. That's beautiful. Let's break from that, because it's shameful and it's depressing. Let's get back to the players. Let's say goodbye to a couple of players, Jarius Familia and Cabrera. What do let's start with the Familia trade. Yes, he was going to be a free agent. We weren't going to retain him. So the objective was to, recoup something of use or value. That's something that J.P. Ricciardi probably did the reconnaissance on, and I think the return and the reviews are mixed. What do you think?
Yeah, I think originally I thought they got hosed in the deal, but I gotta say, Bobby Wall has looked okay in short sample. The other I can't remember the other guy's name now. He's been doing fairly good in the minors. So it may not have been as bad a deal as we thought. Look, if Wall can work out, then it's essentially a 1-for-1 deal. And he may not be a closer, but if he can be a decent piece in a bullpen, then you really didn't lose much in the deal.
Perhaps not. No, that's something we're gonna have to wait and see. But we knew it was going to come to that, so we'll have to wait and see. You're right. Cabrera, he was probably one of the more endearing players over the last few years that the Mets have had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you know what? It was time to let him go.
Absolutely.
Remember
when we signed him? Every GM in baseball was saying his best days were behind him.
Right, and he's had a couple of good years. So it just unfortunately for the Mets, see, it's bad luck too again with them, because he was red hot, and then getting near the trade deadline, he had that slump, and then he started hitting again a little bit, and but when he was red hot, too bad he couldn't have moved him then, but it was earlier in the season. So it's all about timing, and they got what they could for him, and again, it's you have to see if one of them will pan out. Maybe it'll be worth it. But he was a guy that had to go. He was blocking a guy that they really need to look at. McNeil, who's 27. He deserved it based on his hitting this year and last year in the minors, and he really deserves to be up here. And I think you see that so far. He's playing pretty darn good. Does he have the best range at second? No, but neither did Daniel Murphy, and we went to a World Series with him. That's not saying he's Daniel Murphy, but you know what I mean. Did Cabrera have the best range? No, Cabrera had very little range, especially at this point in time. But McNeil's a younger guy. He's hungry, and that's what you want. And look, Rosario's starting to hit now. Was it because they sat him down, or was it because McNeil came up and some other guys came up? Was it because they moved him to the leadoff spot? We don't know, but he's starting to hit, and yet they've got a shortstop in the minors that they say may be better. So maybe you consider moving a Rosario in the off season. But Cabrera had to go. Both of them had to go. Familia and Cabrera. It was just, I think Familia was getting too familiar here, and it was time to clear out the second base job.
Oh, agreed. There's something to be said. I mean, that just reconfirms the notion addition by subtraction.
Right. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What do you think about the Mets captain actually playing in some ball games?
I wish him well. I want nothing for the best. I want nothing, but the best for him. But I don't think it's going to work out to his satisfaction. I think ultimately he's going to face retirement, and once he comes to grips with that, better for him, his wife, and his family. That's where my priorities lie with regard to David Wright. It's time for him to give this game up. He has to work way, way too hard. Each and every, let's just say he makes it back. Each and every game he has to put in, I think they reported upwards of 2 hours of prep work, above and beyond that every other major league is putting in, just to get into a game-ready condition. And, he's not 28 anymore. He's beyond, mid-30s. He's 36 now. Would I like for him to get on the field and for the fans to be able to, just rain down appreciation upon him in person? I would love to see that happen. But as far as his career, I think he needs to look himself in the mirror and say, you know what, I need to preserve my body for my young children and for my interactions with them as they grow. I know he only has one child, but maybe he grows his family. And that's where my mind is. So I wish him well. I wish him luck. I hope he doesn't hurt himself again or makes things worse. And if he can make it to Citi Field one day, I hope to be there and I'll applaud him. But I really think he should retire. What's your take on that?
Well, I agree, and I think he may be getting to that point. He's played in 3 games in 4 days, which is pretty good. Hasn't had a hit or anything. And he said after last night's game, he played 7 innings last night, and he said something to the effect that he's got to prove that he can do it still. If he can't do it, what's the sense? So I think that is going to come around. My scenario has been the whole year, and I said even if he didn't get to play, and he's playing now, but even if he didn't, I said he's got to have one game or one at-bat left in him, in that body. And I would, you're talking about the Wilpons making money. I would announce that the last day of the season, the last home game, is going to be David Wright Day. He's retiring. And you either start him at third base and you let him play, or you let him pinch hit. Don't forget the rosters expand, so he's not taking anybody's spot really. And you let him pinch hit or whatever. If you want to play him the game, and he has that one last at bat, and he comes off, you put it. If he gets a hit, great. You put in a pinch runner. Whatever. And that's it. And he gets his bow.
You heard it here first, folks, on a co-production of a Metsian Podcast and MetsMusings. Gary Mack predicts David Wright will indeed get one last at bat. Am I correct?
I think it's going to happen. I think that's what he's working towards. And look, he comes off the field, and who's he greeted by at the dugout? By Jose Reyes. So
yeah, that's been the background noise this whole time. A send off for the both of them.
Right.
I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that, but I think that's what this is all leading up to. Do you think that, or am I off on that?
Yeah, no, I think there was rumors a month or so ago that they were preparing a video farewell to Jose Reyes. So I think it's working two ways there. I think that tells you he's not coming back next year with the Mets, one way or the other. He said he wants to come back. He said he wants to play.
He shouldn't. As you explained before, open up these positions for the younger guys.
Right.
He shouldn't be back next year.
And
Speaking of which, let's throw another older guy into this conversation. Austin Jackson. He's filling a role. I'll say that much for him.
Hey, look, he's playing good ball.
I don't think I could say much else.
Well, he's hit a little bit, He's stabilized the position a little bit now with Nimmo hurt, and you could say the same thing about Jose Bautista, though his numbers are awful, but he's gotten some big hits and really has played some good third base and played some good right field, and with Nimmo hurt now, you may need somebody like that. So I mean, they weren't, for what they paid for those guys, they were not bad pickups.
All right, you know what? Let's go there. You brought him up. Let's stay there. Jose Bautista. The club has already made it known that they're entertaining bringing him back next season. To me, Gary, that's absolutely ponderous. And I'll ask you, who the hell came up with this idea? Jeff? Omar? Rico? Ricciardi? Who the hell said we need him next year? That's what I want to know.
Well, I think you have
and then I want that person fired.
I think you have to consider a couple of things. And that is, I think it's telling that they're saying we don't have anybody to fulfill an outfield spot. We don't have anybody in the minors that can come up to win a job. And they really don't. They brought up Kazmarski, and he just didn't do anything. And I don't think there's anybody else. There's nobody I can even think of that comes up in conversation at all in the minors that's an outfielder, except now Adolph in single A. But I think that tells you that. B,
I'd sooner put a phone booth out there, okay? I'd sooner put a phone booth out there.
Well, B, with Frazier spending some time on the disabled list, and Nimmo hurt now, and you're not going to have Cespedes. You don't know about Bruce. it gives you insurance at third base and at the right field. So, you know what? If there's young guys playing in the spots and they want to keep a guy like Batista around, a veteran, to spot start, I don't have a problem with that because that's the way I think you build a team. You build with your youth, and then you fill in with experience. And a guy like him may be good for that. But to make him part of the future, no, you're totally out of whack with that. But that's where this team is at now. They don't know what their future is and what they have because they're not bringing these guys up. We know what Wilmer Flores can do. He can hit, he can't catch. And his arm's not that great. So, why not bring up an Alonso? What about Dom Smith all of a sudden now? He's getting the bums rush out of there. They send him back to Vegas, and his job is gone. He's playing left field. Could he have fallen that fast without really? I know they were ticked off last year when he came up and he was out of shape, but look at his shape he got into. All right, and then he pulled the muscle in spring training, and that set him back. I don't know. I think this kid's going to get traded somewhere and go on and be an all-star, but I don't know. I want to see him get a shot first before we come to any conclusions.
And that's precisely why I want this team to rid itself of all these 30 whatevers. Addition by subtraction.
So
and just let the youth take over, for better or for worse.
But I don't.
Ultimately, this team needs a direction.
Oh, without a doubt.
Ultimately, this team needs a direction. Do you have any candidates in mind for the next general manager?
You hear so many.
I know that was a trick question. I really don't. I'll tell you right now. I don't have anyone in mind just yet. And to be quite honest with you, my wish would be to hire a president of baseball operations, someone who A, would separate the Wilpons from that side of the business, B, would ensure that all the Wilpons' needs are met to their great satisfaction, and C, someone who will oversee the entire operation, and the general manager will be hired by this person and report to this person, not to ownership. That's what I would like to see. But do you have a GM candidate in mind?
No. I couldn't even begin to guess. I mean, they're throwing out names, Ben Sherrington. Who knows? I mean, it's like the manager's job. We don't know anything about these guys, but
let's stick with the in-house then. Let's stick with the known. What if they turn around and make John Rico the next general manager? Me? I would break out in a rash.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
What if they make John Rico the next general manager?
I wouldn't go that far, and I'll tell you why. It's possible that he could have learned from Sandy's mistakes. And it seems when they talk, it seems like they want to go in. All of a sudden now they want to talk about defense, and they want to talk about small ball and stuff. So you got to, even though he worked for Sandy, and I'm sure he learned a lot in different areas, you don't know that his head is the same head. You know what I'm saying? He could have agreed with
exactly
Sandy because he works with the guy. But he might have disagreed. And look, I work with people and I disagree with their philosophy, but you go through with it anyway because they're your boss. And it's possible it's the same thing with him. He may want to spread his wings a little bit and put his stamp on this team and do things the way he wants to do it. So I don't think it would be a terrible thing. I have a feeling that's probably the way it's going to happen. I mean, I'd like to see somebody come in from the outside, but are they going to let an outsider do anything either? You don't know. At least this, you might have a fighting chance because he knows how to work with them. And maybe, it's like with any job, you yes your boss to death and then go do something else anyway. And then you just hope it works out so you can, say, well, we thought, that, it was a good deal or whatever. So, it's tough. Look, it's got to be tough being a Wilpons too, reading all of this stuff all the time. I don't think they like being the villain in all of this, and I know everybody thinks they are. I don't think they enjoy it. I don't think Jeff and Fred get together and say, what can we do now to piss the fans off and make us the villain, make us look bad? I believe that. I don't believe that I don't believe that they're bad people, and I don't believe they're in it for the money, but I think they still want to win. And I just think that they might be too nettlesome, if that's a word. Yes.
Oh, they're very meddlesome, but Gary, you have a way of bringing out the more empathetic me. I'm with you. Look, the Wilpons. There's a whole side of me that really does appreciate them. I live in this neighborhood where he went to high school. You understand?
Uh-huh.
I know he was a pitcher. I know he threw a no-hitter. I know Sandy Koufax was his first baseman. I know Jeff was a catcher. He played. I appreciate that they're from Brooklyn. In fact, I kind of like it, if not love it, because I'd rather them, local guys.
Right.
Somebody I can actually relate to on a street level, not that I ever met them or ever floated around in their circles, a virtual impossibility. But, he comes from my neighborhood, or I come from his neighborhood. He preceded me. And so what they've never been is a cold-hearted, conglomerate corporate entity like, say, the Tribune was with the Cubs.
Right.
Or any
CBS.
Number of other examples.
CBS
and
when they own the
Yankees. And I do appreciate that about the Wilpons.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And if I had a preference, I'd like to keep it that way. But they've got to meet us halfway. So if they're listening to a Metsian podcast, look, because you're local, we appreciate that. And we would have wanted in some other more nefarious ends. Because, the ranks of baseball ownership has been rife with them, especially more so lately than ever. So you're right, Gary. I do appreciate all that about them, but they got to meet us halfway. Meddlesome is a very appropriate word, and it's not overly disparaging. It's just an adjective. That's all. Actually, people are contemplating going after them with torches and pitchforks. But what you say is true, and no, they're not purposely going to bed every night dreaming of being the villains the next morning. No, they're not. But sometimes you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I've been at this a long time. We're just not baseball people. So let me find somebody to run this for me. It's mine. It belongs to me. At the end of the day, I get to decide anything I want.
Right.
But for the sake of this team, I need to humble myself. I'm a real estate guy. I understand that very well. Baseball, perhaps not so much. Yeah, I played. Yeah, I pitched. Yeah, I even tossed a no-hitter in my day. But organizationally, perhaps I was a better player than I am that.
Well,
and just meet us halfway.
I think they probably look at the organizational thing and try to run it like they do run their construction business, and there probably are similarities in every corporation, but there are differences as well. And in this particular business, that style obviously doesn't work. Being meddlesome, but I do laugh when people say they're cheap, they don't spend money. Look at the record. I mean, the record shows.
No, they spend money.
They spend,
they spend money and they've gotten tortured in the process. Let's not forget Steve Phillips left them with the highest payroll in the National League in the last place club.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and I mean,
so,
everybody wanted, you got to sign Cespedes, you got to sign Cespedes. Well, they signed Cespedes, and now it's coming back to bite them in the butt. You got to sign Bruce. We need power in the outfield. Well, they signed Bruce. He got hurt. That's not the Wilpons' fault. I mean, they can't do anything about that. The injuries, everybody said, it's the Mets doctors. They changed the whole Mets training staff, and we find out it's not the Mets doctors. So what is it that, that's the things I would be looking at as an owner. I want to know why my guys are getting hurt so often.
Me too.
I want to go down to my lowest level in the minors, and I want to revamp the whole training system so when they come up here, they know how to sacrifice bunt. They know how to steal a base. They know how to slide into a base properly instead of these stupid pop-up slides that they all come off the bag and get tagged out. I want to go old school. I want to teach them how to, if you got a team that came up and played old school baseball, and I'm talking about hook slides and that sort of thing, man, that would revolutionize the game now. And it's nothing new. But
you're singing my song.
It's cyclical, and maybe that cycle will come back, and to a certain extent it has. I think what ruined it all, and everybody says you're always on this soapbox, but the DH, God forbid that the National League ever brings that stupid cancer of a thing into the National League. That is the worst thing that was ever created in the history of baseball. It has ruined so many parts of the game and changed it for a little bit more offense. But, is it really that offensively different now? The numbers have creeped up. The National League is not that far behind the American League. So as far as offense goes, it's just to keep a bunch of old guys that probably should be cut anyway on a baseball team and making big money. And
you know what?
Go ahead.
I want to branch out on that note, and I'm with you 1,000,000%. I'm with you lockstep. You and I, we're in lockstep on that. And I want to say to the younger listeners, your Gen Zers and your millennials and whatnot, and I'm not going to call anybody a geek, but all these stat-crazed people who are reinventing the wheel. This is what I'm going to say. Guys like Gary and I, we remember baseball before the DH, before free agency. You understand? Mm-hmm. Before the advent of the, let's say, the closer pre-save rule, post-save rule. There was no such thing as a closer. It was a reliever. It was a fireman. Okay, but my point is we understand change. Above and beyond, we understand change. And we're not averse to change. And the game is changing, but it's folly. And again, I'll reiterate, we are not averse to change. And what I mean by we 50s and 60s and late 40s and even late 30s. People who remember, a game back in the late 70s at least. Nobody understands change more than we do. We've seen the game evolve. Like amphibians in Darwin's textbooks. We've seen this game change. Again, I'll reiterate, before the DH, before free agency. When I was a kid, I knew exactly who was coming to town each and every year. A team represented something, and the people on it represented more to their cities than anything else. Now it's just every year you have to relearn the whole kebab. So nobody understands change more than we do. Change is cool. We embrace change. But what the game is turning into is complete folly. And if this is what you were born into and you don't know how to compare this game to a different game of another era, well, then don't scream and shout us down calling us old fools. because we can turn around and say the same damn thing to you, young buck. There has to be some middle ground. Unfortunately, we live in a world of extremes.
Mm-hmm.
To hell with moderation. To hell with consideration. Stop me, Gary, please.
No,
this is our show, not my show.
I agree. I say, who cares about launch angle and the velocity off the bat? What the heck does that prove? If Aaron Judge hits a home run 500 feet or 320 feet, it still counts as one run. Doesn't matter how far you hit it. Doesn't matter how hard you hit it. It's a run. It doesn't matter.
That's crazy.
And as far as
that's crazy. The only thing that has changed on launch angle, you know what? 40 years ago, a guy named Howell used to say, "Man, that ball would have went through a cinder block." Now they call it exit velocity.
Yeah.
That's all that's changed. That's all that's changed. We went from colorful, descriptive narratives of a game to launch velocity and exit velocity. You understand?
Yes.
We went from the colorful to zeros and ones, like the Matrix.
And
we plugged ourselves into the Matrix. Holy crap. Gary, we plugged ourselves into the Matrix. We went from colorful, rich lives and interaction and forethought and effort, and now we're plugged into the Matrix. We're on autopilot. The game is on autopilot.
And can I watch the game instead of seeing a box around home plate and the speed of the pitch and the velocity of the launch angle of the perambulator of the triangle, isosceles triangle, whatever the heck it is? I mean, come on. Can't we just watch the ball game without all of this stuff that is meaningless? It really is meaningless. Davy Johnson wrote in his book that was out this past summer that, and he was, Davy Johnson is the grandfather of analytics. I don't know if everybody knows this. He had a computer back in the 60s. He proved to Earl Weaver that he should be batting sixth. And, of course, when he brought in all these spreadsheets and Earl Weaver threw them in a garbage can and said, just go out there. But he even says that the problem today is there's too much data. And he says in computerese, because I believe he's got a degree in computer science, there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. And he says there's too much garbage going in and a lot of garbage coming out. And this is a guy that started a lot of this. But he says now it's gone to the extremes. It's gone to a ridiculous level. A strikeout doesn't matter as an out. But come on, a strikeout is worse than. I'd rather have you put the ball in play because, yes, you may hit into a double play if there's a runner on first. You also the shortstop or the second baseman may kick that ball to the third baseman, and that runner, all the runners are safe. If you strike out, the guy stays anchored at first.
We're watching a third of the defensive gems that we used to watch in the 70s now because everyone's striking out. Nobody's putting the ball in play. Either that or they're losing them into the bleachers.
And how is that more exciting, watching guys strike out?
It's not.
It's not. So
it's not. I guess it is to somebody.
Well,
I find it horrifically boring.
I don't know because they're saying they're trying to make the pace of play, the pace of play, the pace of play. But if guys are striking out all the time, that's making the game boring anyway and longer. I'd rather see guys be more aggressive at the plate and try to smack the ball somewhere. These shifts,
they're killing themselves.
They are, and this commissioner is I hate to say it, but I think he's sticking a dagger in and starting to twist it a little in the game because some of his ideas are downright stupid. I don't know how else to put it. He'll never be a guest on any of my shows, but
but no, they really are killing themselves, and for no good reason. It's ponderous. You know what? Let's cheer ourselves up. Is there anything else you want to get into before we move on to happier things?
No. let's look at the number 16.
Let's look at the number 16. Guys who won the number 16 in history. Let's see. It's a nice list. Are you looking at the list?
I'm looking at a list, yes.
All right.
It's better than most.
Let's go one for one. We don't have to name them. Let's just pick them. You go ahead, sir.
Well,
Start away.
The first one that stands out is Felix Mion to me. Felix came here and wore 16, and then did he switch? He switched to something else, didn't he? Then, but he wore that for a while.
Yes, he did.
And
what didn't he switch to 7? He was a single digit.
Was he? I can't remember what the heck he wore now. Let's see.
Oh boy, somebody's laughing.
That's because
right
we're
now.
old,
You're right. I'm looking at number 7 now. It wasn't 7. I'm wrong.
17.
But I'm pretty sure he's 17. I knew there was a 7 involved in that.
But he's running for. I'll tell you, before him, Mike Jorgensen was a guy that came up, was a pretty good ball player. Young guy, highly touted, never really panned out, but he had some good years in Montreal. I believe he went to Montreal. Had some good years there, so he's a guy that stands out. Of course, John Stearns is on the list. He wore it for a year and then switched to 12. Lee Mazzilli, and what can you say about him? He was a superstar in those dead days of the late 70s and early 80s.
He was gorgeous in the disco era. He was hot.
yeah. And I'll let you pick the obvious choice.
I'm with you on these for now. Felix Mion, he's still up amongst my all-time favorite Mets because when you're young, these guys, they make an impression upon you. And John Stearns, another one. He's still in my all-time top 10. I love him so much. The dude. And it's funny that Mike Jorgensen is on this list. Do you remember? Because Mike Jorgensen had gotten beamed previously, and I believe it was like 78 or so, 77, 78, maybe 79. Mike Jorgensen was at the plate, and somebody came too close to his head again, and John Stearns came darting out of the dugout and attacked the pitcher in defense of Mike Jorgensen. Not that the pitch hit him. It's just that John Stearns took exception to that pitch coming so close, knowing what Jorgensen had gone through. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yes, I do. And in those days, that's what they did.
Well, let's not even talk about what happened yesterday. But, there's an anecdote for the ages, folks. Lee Mazzilli, man, he was hot in the disco era. Everyone loved Lee Mazzilli. Him and Bucky Dent. That's all the city talked about. They were the Derek Jeters of the day.
Right, that's right. They had that long hair and.
My goodness.
Mazzilli was such.
Let me see if there's anything.
He was fun to watch too, Mazzilli, wasn't he?
Oh yeah.
He glided after a ball. He didn't really seem to run. He just seemed to glide, and really a good player. Not this superstar.
He came up really hot.
Yeah.
He came up really hot in the 76 call-ups. No, or was it the 75 call-ups? Was 77 his first full season?
I think 77 was his first full season.
First full. He came up in the September 76 call-ups, and made a major impression. Yeah, let's get to the more obvious names on this list. Dwight Gooden.
Shame. Really, the career that could have been.
Weren't those nights electric? More so than the Dark Knight ever came close to on his best night.
Oh my goodness!
The nights Dwight Gooden pitched were electric.
Oh, it was they used to say the Dark Knight was an event when he pitched. No. That was a sideshow.
No.
This was an event. You could not get a ticket.
Yeah.
You could not. It was just an unbelievable time, and I can remember being glued. Now that's where the strikeouts were interesting when he was pitching. But the games were 2.5 hours long. They weren't dragged out, and just he was so electric. Just really a shame what happened, and you wish you could go back and smack him in the head before he took that first hit of coke and said, "What are you doing, stupid? Let's get out of here." You just got to wonder.
Tragic in the Greek tragedy sense,
Yep. Just got to wonder, and you got to wonder, did they bring him up too soon? I don't know.
He was only 19. They brought him up from Lynchburg, correct?
Yeah, and now you got to wonder, maybe the Wilpons are slow to bring up guys for that reason. Who knows? They brought up, how old was Strawberry when he came up? He was 20, right? He was young.
Yeah, but I'd be putting that on Cashin. I
think they should have watched them a little bit more because they were kids. But look, Ed Kranepool came up at 17, and they stuck him with Frank Thomas, who was 35, as a roommate.
Yeah, they did.
So, who's to say? But just what such a waste of talent. You can't even find the words to say it. Just a shame.
David. Yeah, it really is. David Cohn. He only wore the number for one season, but David Cohn is nevertheless David Cohn. Now, Gary, 88. I was in Germany, so I didn't get a front row view of everything going on. Did that article he wrote in the newspaper really blow it to the Mets?
Oh boy,
that motivate the Dodgers?
That ticked off people. I mean, that ticked off the Dodgers no end. And look, Hershiser was a one-man wrecking crew. I think he pitched like in every game. I'm surprised his arm didn't fall off in that playoff, and they just couldn't hit him. I mean, it was just incredible. I remember I went to game, I'm going to say 3, and it was it got rained down on a Friday night, and I'm pretty sure it was game 3. It got rained out on a Friday night. They played it Saturday at noon, and it was rainy and miserable at the ballpark, and it was a pretty good game, back and forth. But, Hershiser just dominated that series, and then once Socia hit the home run.
Bulldog, right?
Yeah.
Bulldog?
Yeah. But the real turning point was when Socia hit the home run, because Gooden had them stymied, and that home run plus the article ticking them off, it just was too much. They couldn't.
No, Gary, you know what was too much? I was in Germany listening to the game on Armed Forces Radio Network. My roommate was from Los Angeles.
Oh, that was too much. That would do it.
Oh,
but,
boy, memories.
some other interesting names on the list.
Yeah, Paul Lo Duca.
Paul Lo
served his
Duca
purpose.
had a great
Good
year.
catcher, outspoken.
Yeah.
Great 2006. Controversial 2007.
Yeah. Angel Pagan had a couple of good years here. Rick Ankiel.
Apparently he wore out his welcome, though. From what we hear, he wasn't very well liked.
Well, that was the whole thing. He wanted to play center field and
rumors,
hit leadoff and everything, or didn't want to hit leadoff. Then he wanted to hit leadoff. I forget now over the course of time. But how about Rick Ankiel? Remember him here for at least almost a month? And he's thinking about coming back to baseball now as a lefty specialist. So we'll see how that works.
Why not make a crazy story even more insane?
Yeah, right. And of course, now we got Austin Jackson wearing it. So the rest of the other guys pretty nondescript, I guess. Dilson Herrera, Danny Muno, Kevin Kazmarski.
Yep.
So we'll see.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap on number 16. Let's wrap this baby up. Your final word, Mr. Mack.
Well, I'm gonna, I hope everybody goes over and listens to Mets Musings. As I said, it's a weekly podcast, and if anybody's interested in helping out Ed Kranepool needs a kidney. If you think you want to be a donor, you can contact the Stony Brook Hospital. They are handling everything. Get in touch with them. Ask about their I don't have a number or anything because I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head. But Ed Kranepool, an original Met, needs a kidney, and he's doing pretty good. He feels pretty good. Do we have time for a quick story?
Absolutely. We have all the time you want, baby.
Okay. A few weeks ago, well, actually a month and a half ago, I actually had the opportunity to go to Ed Kranepool's house. He was selling some of his memorabilia, and it was by appointment only, and you can go look and buy some stuff. And a buddy of mine, a friend of mine, said, do you want to go? And he put me in contact with the guy that was running the sale, and I said, you know what, I'll go. Maybe I can get an interview out of it. Well, I didn't get the interview out of it, but I did get to meet Ed Kranepool in his house, in his basement, and see his memorabilia, and it was very surreal. It was very weird to be there. And we sat and talked baseball for a while. And very nice guy. And as I said, he needs a kidney. He's got a lot of medical bills and stuff. And so if anybody's interested, Stony Brook Hospital, contact them, and they'll hook you all up and get it all done. But it was really cool to meet him in his house, and it was very neat. And I purchased this a picture of him and Casey that if you're watching the video, you can see behind me here. In 1962, I guess, or 63. It's at the Pologram, so it's got to be one of those 2 years. And it's signed by Ed. So that's that's all I got. If you want to help him out, contact Stony Brook Hospital and say a prayer for him.
I had the great fortune of meeting Ed Kranepool at a Cyclones game. You know, from time to time they have people there come and sign autographs, and I, in fact, got Ed Kranepool's autograph in my program. And, you know, again, I go back to being young and impressionable. And there's just a game that I will never, ever forget, Gary. In 1976, summer, I was sitting in the mezzanine section with my pop. We were playing the Giants at Shea. The score was tied 2-2. And Steady Eddie Kranepool hit a 3-run home run that, as far as I'm concerned, hasn't even landed yet. It went over the U-Haul sign. As far as I'm concerned, you know, because when you're young, man, wow.
And what was the launch angle?
Say again?
What was the launch angle and the velocity off the bat on that?
You know what? That's for another generation to answer. As far as this kid was concerned, like I say, that ball still has yet to land. Steady Eddie, and I was sitting the first base side, so while he was at bat, you know, I'm staring square at his number 7 on his back.
Right.
And watching him go through the full range of his swing. And it was just so majestic. And it was a night game. And as I think another announcer had said during the Yankee playoff game one, and into the New York night. Man, if I could have only thought of that phrase then, that's how I feel now. I'll never forget that game. It's just one game, you know, you have them.
Right.
That you just keep you forever, and that's just one of them. Mets won that game 5-3 on Eddie Kranepool's 3-run home run at Shea against the Giants.
There you go.
That, and you know, I can't echo loud enough his need and your words. But you know, I wish him well. I'm getting a little sad because, you know, Eddie Kranepool goes back to our childhood, and he's special to us, if not to others, you know, but he's certainly special to me and to you, Gary.
And
so my final word, I'll just leave it with thank you. You always, man, you take me through a full range of emotions like the Cyclones and Coney Island. That's why I love talking baseball with you. I ranted. I'm almost to tears now with Eddie Kranepool. So damn you, Gary. Damn you. And that said, I thank you for your time. Catch this also at MetsMusings. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the 16th episode of the Metsian Podcast. Sorry Sam and Rich could not participate this evening, but business and travel takes them away. Hopefully they'll return next week. Gary, a million thank yous again. And good night, my friend. I hope to speak with you very soon.
I hope to do that too, Michael, and thanks so much for having me.
The pleasure's all mine. Good night, my friend. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview that I did on the Metsian Podcast, and I think we talked about a lot of subjects. I want to thank Michael Lecolant for having me on his show and him being on my show. So it's sort of like across the aisle type of thing. Okay, Mets got 3 more games with the Phillies, as it looks like they're going to split the doubleheader here tonight as we record this, and then they come home for 4 against San Francisco, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more about the National Series coming up next weekend. So I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned again for another episode of Mets Musings, and remember, as tough as the season has been, there are some signs, and so we got to keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. See you next time.